Look, we're super excited about this week's podcast. Body Science Ambassador for Happiness, Luke Mathers, is in the house. How are you, mate?
Oh, mate, always excited to be at HQ.
Yeah, hey, we love it when you come in. Look, you came in, you did a little bit with our team recently, and we thought, let's do a podcast on that. You're going to have a chat to us today about why we do what we do and how to change it.
We're going to get curious about our habits.
Let's rip in.
Welcome to the Body Science Podcast. As always, the information contained in this podcast is for the information purposes only and is not designed to diagnose or be prescriptive to treat, prevent, or manage any injury, disease, or other health-related condition.
Welcome to Body Science HQ, the world of fit, happy, healthy, and I'm throwing on the end Curious Habits with author Luke Mathers. You're dropping your third book. Obviously, there's good money in being an author because you keep writing them. It's none of my business or anyone else's, but it's really interesting. This topic you've bought is actually, I think, the best of your three books.
Oh, thanks, Greg. It's almost like having a favourite child. You're not meant to actually get too excited about one of them over the other one, but I've really loved the process of writing this one. It's been really good fun.
And I know you've said to me, don't say that you haven't read it, but I won't. It's actually, I got one 2 days ago, so give me a break. But I'm really keen to read this book. Like, I've had a flick through some of the parts in it, especially towards the end. I thought some of the last chapters were some of the best stuff you've ever written. It's
a really great process when you there's an expression that you can't polish a turd, and I don't think my writing's that great, but having a really good editor means that I can get the best ideas I've got out, and she'll make them actually sound really.
So that's
good.
how. Let's talk about writing a book for those people out there. Is that how it works? Is it you going with your vomit of information, and then someone turns that into a book, or do you have a strategy already in place? Your chapters are laid out. You just need someone to, cross T's and dot I's. And
well, you do a structural edit at the start. You kind of work out what you want to take someone who reads the book, what you want to take them from and to.
Yep.
And with this one, I wanted them to be able to get curious about what they do and change because they want to change, not because they have to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing about curious habits. A curious habit is something we feel, think, and do that's no longer serving us. And we all have a heap of them.
Yep.
All right. But every habit that we've got at some stage was helpful. It served a purpose at some stage. Got us to where we are. Yeah, got us to where we are. There's a great line by a coach in the States called Marshall Goldsmith that what got us to here won't get us to there.
Absolutely, that's gold.
And particularly in a business sense, that line is just absolute gold. But it happens with everything. There's a whole bunch of things that really served us well at some stage in our life, and we've just hung on to them forever, even when they're not serving us anymore. And I think if we can get curious about why we're doing some of those things, we can change them from a place of wanting to change rather than having to change.
And can I ask a really dumb question here, mate? Because I'm loaded with them. When you talk about those habits and getting curious about them, are we talking all topics in life? Are we talking like we're doing this for happiness, we're doing this for success, we're doing this for goal setting, or are we pulling this back into a bit of a line where it's got a bit of it sits within this category and don't leave it? Like, no. How wide is curious habits?
As wide as you like. Anything you feel, think, and do that's not serving you. All right. So I'm feeling distressed about something. Why am I feeling that? What's causing that? What are my options? One of the things we do is we take our brain's shitty first draft at however we.
And it's renowned at giving back what it knows.
Well, it gives back the thing that makes you safe.
Yeah.
We've all got a negative bias. So as cavemen, the guy that didn't have a negative bias got eaten. So we got them passed down from thousands and thousands of years ago. So we've got a negative bias. Put that aside, deal with it. You've got it no matter what. It's part of the ABCs of us. But one of the things is we can't let that negative first crack at whatever goes on be the thing that dictates what we do. And most of the time we do. We just go with whatever our first response is. In the book, I talk a lot about a thing called a sea squirt. And a sea squirt is this tiny little larva. It's born like a larva, and it swims around the ocean, and it goes away from parts of the ocean where there's toxic stuff, goes towards parts where it's nice clean water and nutrients, finds a place that's good, then attaches itself to a rock and it eats its own brain. All right? This is what this animal does.
You authors obviously have a lot of time.
Right. I actually told that story
You just got to write down, how did you work that out? How did you find that?
Well, it's one of those things that what we actually do is we end up going towards things that are good, we end up going away from things that are bad, and then we don't change. And we've all got this little inner sea squirt in us. I actually told that story at a workshop I did. People in the workshop says, oh yeah, we've got whole departments of sea squirts. They're everywhere. But we all have little C-squirt moments where that little first towards, we avoid pain and we seek pleasure, all right? And sometimes those things don't give us our long-term goals and don't give us the things that are actually going to make us happy.
Well, they're not. They're just going to make us safe.
Well, they make us safe and they often give us that little bit of instant gratification. You get that this feels good right now, even though I'm going to pay for it later on and I'm not going to like what the results that I'm getting.
Yeah, okay. So when we're talking, I'm hoping we're not getting off track here, but when we talk about management and people on the hustle out there, so you get to a point in life where you'll try anything to get to that first level, and so your risk is high. Then when you've got, and I'm going to use some terms here, you've got the BMW and the house and the partner and the family, you sort of start to go into a little bit of a safe zone there because you've now got things that you have to do for people. You have to continue to pay for your car. You have to continue to pay for your house. You have to continue to pay for school. So I believe there's a period where we all get a little bit safe. In that period. Do you think this curious habits is age related? This is where I'm getting with this. Is this something that people should be looking at early in life? Adopt, like, it's really easy when you sit with young kids and they'll go, oh, I've got these pictures of this car I want and this, all these things I want. So that they're goal setting based on thinking happiness comes from getting a car or getting or whatever. And we both know that's not what creates happiness. At what stage in our life should we be looking at getting curious about our habit?
From toddlers.
Okay.
We should be curious about our habits the whole way along. What am I getting out of this? How is it helping? The whole what we do, why we do what we do, and how to change. If you're kind of aware of that, then you're going to be aware.
You've got to have a level of self-awareness and things in place to be able to think like that, though.
You do.
I mean,
part of your brain that does that isn't actually developed till your mid-20s anyway.
And it would be something you'd have to learn and then apply. It's not something that's just going to happen to you, is it?
No.
People aren't going to suddenly start thinking like that. They have to have it.
Well, it's a learned procedure.
Yeah.
It's something that we learn how to do. And it's actually, my second book was called Reset, and it was all about teenagers and how to get them to speak to themselves more nicely, to actually coach themselves a bit better and to actually decrease some of the anxiety and stuff that they have. And I think if we can get into those habits when we are really young, we actually set neural pathways. Neural pathways in our brain, how our brain works on repetition. The neurons that fire together wire together. So the more often you have a certain thought, the stronger that pathway gets in your brain. And one of the hassles is if you start building pathways of anxiety and pathways of fear and pathways of worry, then you've now got pathway. That's your default way to go. Yeah. That's your normal way to go. One of the stories I tell in the book that has really resonated with all of my coaching clients in workshop is, I don't know if you've noticed, but between the Gold Coast and Brisbane, there's a behemoth of a motorway, the M1. And around about sort of Ormo, there's a spot where if you look out to your right as you're driving to Brisbane, you can kind of see another little road that goes along right next door to the M1. Do you know the bit I'm talking about?
No, but there's a lot of people that aren't from Brisbane, so let's just move on. Yep.
Basically what the council had done is they built a new motorway right next to the old motorway.
To the old highway.
So the old highway used to be one lane each way for a bit. Trip. It was a pain in the neck to get to university when I was a teenager. And what we've actually done is that the council and main roads have actually built this behemoth of a motorway next to it, but the old one's still there. And that's something we've got to be aware of, that old way of thinking, the way we thought when we were teenagers and the way we thought when we were little kids, the little motorway of that is still there. But if we've got to make sure we build the one that we want deliberately, if that makes any sense.
It makes complete sense. Because one of the things in that, the science of wellbeing, and I know you're doing the course too.
Yep, we just finished it recently.
That Yale cert that we both did. It's a short course.
Probably should tell everyone about that.
Anyone out there who just wants to have a look at, it's called the science of wellbeing, but it's probably more around happiness scores.
Massively, it's about that, about what makes us happy and what doesn't.
And it's 8 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of time. I highly recommend people just jump on and do that. It's been funded by some rich guy in the US who said it was the most popular course in Yale.
Yeah, it's done it. 4 million people have done it. 4 million and 2, I think.
Yeah, and 2. And he said that more people should do this. They took it out of Yale and gave it to everyone. You can do it for free.
Yep.
Unless you want the Yale cert, then it costs a bit of money, but it's still $100 or something.
Yeah, nothing.
Anyone out there, that's enough of that. But what I did learn with this in relation to curious habits, it's okay to read your book and go, oh, I know I should do that. But you actually have to apply it for it to become real. And that's a big thing that I got from that course. I thought that was one of the big takes, and you probably live that area, so you're with it. So what I want to try and step back here, Luke, is you're saying that there's so many different silos in life that we can use curious habits with. So how do we apply it? And that's what I want to dig into now. Like, people can read your book, Curious Habits, but it's the whole applying it that makes it viable. So how do we apply curious habits? Yeah,
it's a really good question. One of the things they talked about in that Yale course was the G.I. Joe principle.
Yep.
And the G.I. Joe principle was basically, if you know how to do something, then you're halfway there.
But you're
but knowing, you're only
halfway there. Yes,
exactly. So how do we then put things in place so that we get the whole way there? And I think when you do that, you've got to understand how habits are formed. And we've known a lot about habits from a lot of years now. We go back to Pavlov and go back to Thorndike back at the turn of the last century. So it's over 100 years ago. They worked out that most habits form by having a cue or a trigger, and we can talk about that a little bit in a bit as well. Then you have the behavior that you do, and then you have the reward that you get out of it. So it's cue, behavior, reward. All right. And one of the things that happens is that people talk about things triggering you. You heard that, particularly with around anxiety and everything about curious habits. It's not just about eating or exercise. It's about thought habits and about feelings and stuff like that as well. And you get words like they trigger my anxiety. You've heard people.
Oh, I've heard that. I hear that a lot. Yeah.
And couple of things I hate about that sentence. One, the use of the word trigger, and they use it a lot. And when you pull a trigger on a gun, how much control over that bullet have you got after you pull the trigger?
Oh, unless you're an expert, zero.
Zero. Once you pull the trigger, it's gone. All right. So when we use things like that, triggers my
You mean those
anxiety.
movies I watch where they swing a bullet around someone?
I don't think they happen
wow.
very often. People use phrases like it triggers my anxiety. All right. And so basically what that says is if this thing happens, it's like pulling a trigger and I don't have any control over what I do. And I'm going to push back against that because I think you do. And I think what we've got to do is swap triggers for cues. If you're acting on stage or something like that, it's like cue, off you go.
Yep.
Your cue when you're playing pool, it's the one that actually starts the process, that hits the white ball, that hits the other ball. We have cues all over the place.
Yep.
And one of the things I think with curious habits is that we need to plant the cues in our life that actually help us do the things we want to do and try and remove some of the cues that are perhaps triggers for the things we don't want to do.
Okay, can I ask a question here, or have you got a bit more to add to that?
No, keep going.
Okay, so I'm a PT, 27. Doing okay. Do I now have to work out, what are my triggers for happiness? What are my triggers for anger? What are my triggers for accountability? Do we need to document these triggers?
I don't know whether you have to write them down and stuff.
But what I get to here, Lukey, is what you're saying makes complete sense. And I talk to a lot of people post our podcast. They go, I just love that. And they just go, I just wish I knew how to start that. And I know I go on about that a lot when I talk about things.
I'll give you a great example.
Yeah, perfect.
Anyone who thinks their job's boring, right? I was an optometrist for 27 years, right? I've asked which one's clearer, this one or that one, 9.5 million times.
Wow.
All right. I loved being an optometrist.
That's a few pairs of glasses.
Yeah, that's a lot.
You've got a lot of golf clubs.
Thank you, Specsavers. I have the big house and the splash car near the beach.
Yeah.
All right. And I loved optometry. I hated that part of it, but I learned to compartmentalize that, and that was okay. In the last couple of years I really didn't want to be there. I'd written a book already. I was doing workshops. I was doing the stuff that I felt like the gifts I wanted to give was to get out there and help the world get better at stress and get curious about their habits and things like that. I wanted to do that full time, but I still owned a business. I still had to be there. I still had to be a good boss, and I still had to be a good optometrist. But every day I was going into work, I was resenting it and kicking stones until I stopped and had a look in the mirror and went, okay, all of this stuff now, put it in practice.
Yeah.
And as I walked, I had a practice at Pacific Fair in Queensland, one of the shopping centres there. And there's a big doorway near City Beach, right, which is about 100 metres from my store. And what I did is I used that doorway as my cue. The moment I walked through that doorway, I'm in work mode. We've talked on this podcast before about Carlos, and Carlos is the better version of me. All right. We talk about that in Curious Habits as well. That I walked through that doorway, and that was my cue to be Carlos. And Carlos is curious, creative, and generous. They're my identity goals. That's who I want to be. And so in that 100 meters between City Beach and my shop, how am I going to be curious about finding the best solutions for my patients, creative about finding best ways to get, the best out of my team, and generous with my time and my energy to every person I meet in that day.
Lovely.
And the moment I had that 100 meters to go from kicking stones and not wanting to ask which one's clearer, number one or number two, I got in the right mindset. I walked into work. G'day everyone. How are you? I was a great leader again. I was a great clinician, and I did my job well and actually enjoyed it. I didn't really want it to be there. I had other things I wanted to do. But the moment I connected with the best version of me, I could go in there and do it. So what we've got to learn to do is put the cues in place that make us connect with what the best version of us is. And then how does that version turn up every day? So we can plant those cues.
You should create an app that people can actually put their thought processes into and actually come up with their purpose and vision. And it's funny, like we do it for our companies. Like all of our companies have it. We got it on the wall here. I can walk around the office and everyone can tell us what our purpose this, but I bet you if I said, what's yours? They go, well, hang on, let me have a think about that. You know, and that's probably, I don't know, is that something we should be curious about?
Massively. It's a big part of this, and it actually helps a lot. And we've talked before about finding Carlos, and finding Carlos is a process I do in both workshops, and it's my favorite thing to do with a coaching client. We usually do it on the first session. And basically what it is I think we have a hierarchy of goals. You talked before about the kids having a picture of a car they really want and stuff like that. I actually think we're mistakenly putting that sort of stuff on the top of our hierarchy of goals. And I think it's got to be a run or two below. And I think the top of it needs to be, what sort of human do I want to be?
Absolutely.
All right. And the type of human I want to be is, to me, it's curious, creative, and generous.
Yeah.
I actually tell a story, I hope she doesn't mind, about your daughter in this book. And I was meant to change the name and they didn't change it, unfortunately. But
does she know that?
She does. I told her the other day. She was okay. But we did it with her. And Summer was struggling for a little while. You'd remember she didn't really want to go out.
I love her to death. She's the smartest person, the most beautiful kid, but she had no off button when it came to how good she thought she needed to be.
Yeah. And
I'm probably a dead dad now, everyone out there. So all you fathers out there, just put your head down for me for a second. I'm in trouble.
But Summer and I did Finding Carlos. And what we came up with Summer was, she was brave and determined. And if you know your wife, you know where she got that from. All right. But she was really struggling with social anxiety. She wanted everyone else to be perfect when she went out. And she was going out with newly minted adults that are going to get on the piss. They're going to do stupid shit. They're going to mess things up.
And she's chasing other goals.
Yeah, she's chasing up, but she also was looking at that saying, don't do that, and worrying and panic about it. Hated that, so then didn't go out and turned into a hermit for a few months. We did Finding Carlos, and her Finding Carlos phrase was, she wanted to be brave and determined with a thoughtful acceptance.
Nice.
All right. So once she decided that the best version of her was brave and determined with a thoughtful acceptance, when her friends did stupid shit, it might have triggered her in the past to want to sort of go away and, I don't want to be near this. But once she connected with the best version of herself that had a thoughtful acceptance, she was okay with it.
Yeah.
And all of that anxiety just went away. It went away instantly. And all of a sudden she connected with her friends again. She didn't mind if they weren't perfect, because that's okay. They don't need to be. And she kind of started to push back when she found that perfectionist thing coming up. She started wrestling with that as well. And I think perfectionism is probably one of the best curious habits around. It's useful until it's fine.
Yep.
You know, attention to detail is really, really useful. Being a perfectionist is basically a way of doing your best so that no one can pick on you. It's based in fear.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Perfectionism is based in fear.
Okay.
If I can look perfect, act perfect, get perfect marks, have everything perfect, no one can say anything bad about me and I'm okay. What if you're just okay anyway? You know what I mean? Perfectionism is that. It's based in fear. Brené Brown calls it carrying around a 20-ton shield. It might keep you safe, but you're carrying around a 20-ton shield.
Yep.
And that's kind of what perfectionism is. It's, if I can do everything perfect, then I'm okay. And one of the real things I want to get across in Curious Habits is, what if you're okay anyway, but you still want to strive from a place of being okay? And I think if we can learn to do that, a lot of our curious habits are going to go away. I think we have this idea that if I don't have these real goals that are pushing me all the time, I've got to lose 3.8 kilos and I've got to this. And what it does, it almost puts happiness on the other side of the horizon. I call them horizon habits, that I'll be happy when this happens.
Yep.
And we talk a lot in this. I interviewed a really cool guy called Josh Dodds, who's a psychotherapist from Pennsylvania. Wrote a really good article that was in the Harvard Business Review, I think. And I contacted him and thought, I really like this thing. He has a thing called unhappy achievers. And an unhappy achiever is a person that has to achieve certain goals. When he gets that goal, she's then got to look at what the next goal is, and we've got to move on to that.
Yep.
And what they do is an unhappy achiever will attach their self-worth to whether they're achieving their goals or not. The moment they stop achieving their goals, their self-worth goes down the toilet. It kind of sounds familiar. You can think about 5 or 6 people straight away who have that same thing. And I've experienced that myself a little bit, that sort of, if I have the number 1 store in the country, then I'll be happy. If I don't have to go to work anymore, I'll be happy. Like, I retired for the first time at 31 and thought my life that's going to be bed and roses and everything's going to be great from then on. And I was miserable within about a year because I didn't have anything to strive for. So we kind of get really worried that we're going to get apathetic and bored and not do anything. And I don't think that's the way humans are. I think we're always going to try and strive, but we can't try and strive if we're afraid of perfection, and we can't strive if we're attaching our results to our self-worth.
Hi, I'm Tom Green, Olympic champ from Tokyo, and if you want the best tasting protein bars on the market, you should try the new Body Science Mousse range. Greg, you better be testing these.
Mate, they're getting drug tested, got you covered. So if I want to start thinking about curious habits, what do I do?
I think the first thing is get in contact with what your identity goals are. What sort of human do you want to be?
And 2 to 3 of those?
What's that? Usually
2 to 3
of those. Yeah, most of the
Is there
time.
somewhere people can go that you've got something they can look at? Do you have a form or they can play? Or do you have a downloadable sheet or anything?
Yeah, if you go to lukemathers.com.au,
Yeah.
there's a thing called Finding Carlos on there.
Okay, cool.
So you can actually download a PDF of that. You can fill it in yourself.
Fill it in and play the game a bit.
Yeah,
Yep.
you can play
Sweet.
it. It's something that you need to do with someone else.
And if people do want to reach out to you and have some, do you do one-off coaching, that type of thing? You do that type of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do they get you?
Just go to lukemathers.com.au.
Okay,
and,
cool.
fill in the form on there and you can get me.
You're mainly doing a lot of corporates these days, though, aren't you?
Yeah, a lot of
athletes.
businesses love it because what we do is we actually do Finding Carlos. So we go in and I'll get
In front of each other?
Yeah, what we do is normally get the boss up the front.
Is it a private thing, Finding Carlos, or is it something you tell people?
You usually tell people,
Yeah, okay,
because there's things you're proud of. I want to be that. And what I often do is get the boss out the front, and the boss and I will do it together. And it's a really good opportunity for whoever's the leader. She might get up and tell the story of this person I met here, and this is why I admired their traits.
Yeah.
And then we ask them a time when she was at her best, and she'll say all the things that she was like at a certain time, and certain challenges came her way. And one of the beauties of that, from a worker point of view, is then they can sort of say, "Wow, I get how Greg is now from all of those things I just learned and what things he finds important," which is a really good thing for morale. And I didn't do it as a team building thing, but as a group dynamic thing, it's really good. And then what we do is we send people off as pairs, and there's usually 2 or 3 of us that will go around and help each other find their right words, and they'll all come back with an alter ego, and they'll all come back with their sort of, it's almost like Craig Duncan's deathbed scorecard. They'll come back with their 3 words that they'd like to have on their tombstone. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow and you stood up and did my eulogy and said I was curious, creative, and generous, would you use words like that for me?
Absolutely, because you would have a massive wake on if I was organising it.
Yeah, it probably would.
Most generous person on the Gold Coast at that day. But mate, that's exactly, you're right. Like, I'm taking the piss out of you, but that is so true. That is you as a human. And I mean, that's why you sit now as our happiness ambassador here at work. You do a lot with the team here at work. I'm a bit off track here, but we did something really cool when you came in, what was it, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? And you did the different ways to approach an issue.
Yep.
So you did the magpie.
Different ways to do feedback. I better do a hat tip to Georgia Merch here, who's a friend of mine who owns a company called Can We Talk. Yeah. And Georgia came up with 3 different ways to give feedback. And you can give feedback as a magpie. Magpie swoops in, pokes someone on the head and then buggers off.
Loved it.
You can give feedback as a mouse, and a mouse will kind of not give much feedback at all. And if it does, they'll sort of hide it underneath the whole, not really give much feedback at all. Yep. I chucked in, you could do it like a monkey, and that's when you get sort of passive aggressive and say things that are a little bit snarky that you can back away from. And I think
mean like the monkeys when you go to Bali and you walk through the they're going to grab anything they can.
They'll do things that are just a little bit sneaky.
Yep.
Quite often people might give feedback in a way that's just a little bit sneaky that they could back out of it if they had to.
Yep.
And I think that's a little bit spineless. I think if you've got feedback to give it, and give it with the right intent.
So are you saying be a magpie, a mouse, or a monkey?
Well, the last one is being a meerkat. And a meerkat.
Number 4 is meerkat.
Yeah, the meerkat is, if you ever watch a meerkat, they're amazing. They'll sit there and they'll look in 4 different directions and they'll keep looking out to make sure everyone's safe. And it's everyone's job to look around to make sure everyone's safe, and everyone has a voice and everyone's listened to. And I think if we can, particularly in businesses, if we can be more like meerkat and less like magpies and monkeys and mice, I think we're actually going to be able to give feedback. One of the last chapters in this is actually about dodging difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And again, I talk about Georgia Merch, and she's a guru. But one of the things that we quite often do, and one of the big things, because a lot of stuff I do is about stress, is dodging a difficult conversation is actually just leaving a rock in your stress bucket. You've got this thing it's like having a splinter stuck in your hand.
Yep.
And it hurts, but it's going to hurt to get it out, but it's going to really hurt to leave it there. So the advice that Georgia gave in this is have the conversation, but make sure you're really clear on your intent.
That's the important part,
the intent. She uses the expression that people will hear your content, they'll hear the words that you say, but they'll smell your intent. So if you're doing it to put someone down, if you're doing it to make yourself rise up bigger, if you're doing it
if you're an upline with an ego, it's not.
Yeah. If you're doing it with the wrong intent, people are going to smell it.
Yep.
All right. So be clear about your intent and have the conversation. It's pulling the splinter out.
Nice.
There's no point sitting there and resenting someone for certain behavior. Another mentor of mine, Danny Ginsberg, has this thing that if one of your direct reports isn't doing something well and you're getting frustrated by it, do they know?
That's
you told
a good
them?
question. That is a really good question.
Does that person know that they're upsetting
People
you?
have a
with
lot of
this thing?
arguments in their head before they get to that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a curious habit. And you've got to remember too, the more of those arguments we have in our head, we're rewiring our brains.
We're working with a peer and they're driving us nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our head, we've killed them, we've blown them up, we've spoken to them, we've punched them.
Or we've rehashed the same conversation 20 times
your
in our head.
brain is very, very clever at making it sound better than it really is. Because you had that stat for me once that you said, sure, it was something like 76% of things that you think will happen actually don't happen or something.
Yeah, 85% of things you think you worry about don't happen. 12% of them happen and don't actually have the bad reaction that you thought they would.
Yep.
And only 3% of them happen and have the negative consequences.
And so we can take a lot of that stress out just by
having the conversation.
But putting the intent in the beginning of it.
Yeah.
As to why we're having
being really clear with ourselves about our intent first.
Yep.
Like it's easy to go
I
in
say,
there.
so you do it to yourself before
Do it
you
to yourself
yep.
first. Why is that bothering me? The one we talked about in reset was catch, wait, and reset.
Mm-hmm.
Catch the thing that's pissing you off. Catch the physical feeling that's going on. Wait is what am I thinking? And reset is control, alt, delete. What can I control? What can I change? What do I need to get rid of? So you can kind of do that to yourself first. And then you've got the right intent is I'm going to have this conversation with Greg because the thing that Greg's doing with this is causing these other problems and Greg might not know about that. So let's have the conversation. Let's pull the splinter out and then together we can work out how to go on. And I think feedback, we kind of think of it like the magpie. You go in there and give it and bugger off. But feedback should be like a dance or a game of tennis. We should be able to go back and forth and hear the other person's point of view and throw the little nuances and things back at us and be able to have a dance with it.
Yeah, nice.
I don't think we do that very well as a society. I don't think we give feedback well, and I definitely don't think we receive it well.
Yeah, fair point. So why we do what we do and how to make change. Curious Habits by Luke Mathers will be available for download from where, Luke?
From Amazon. Amazon from 1st of July.
1st of July. So get on 1st of July and download Curious Habits.
It'll be great.
Sounds like a good book. I'll know in a couple of days.